Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1, Episode 4 of Trails of Cold Steel, Northern War. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we're catching up with the squad, and we're also getting some little cameo appearances from some characters here and there. Well, first and foremost, they're leaving Ordis. They make a drop, stop by, and Raquel. I'd seen the picture at the end of the ending credits, and I was like, oh, like that's a casino. There's only two places that could be either Raquel or Crossbell, and it seems like it was Raquel. Stopping on was a casino, Alicia, and lo and behold, there's someone there you see there, and it looks like it's Ash. I'm like, that seems like that's Ash just wearing glasses. Not unless it's meant to just be like, wait, is it? It seemed like it, especially with the other like cameos they drop, because you're in Heimdall, and lo and behold, who's behind him at one point in time? None other than our favorite Phantom Thief. And I'm like, what are you doing in Heimdall though? Like, I mean, now, especially after everything went down. Because I think in my head, I'm like, oh, like after everything went down, as the way Osborn kind of put it, it's like, oh yeah, go crawling back to your Grandmaster, and I'm taking that Phantasmal Blaze plan of yours and stuff like that, right? But it makes sense. Of course, they still be in Erebonia, because Erebonia is a piece to the Phantasmal Blaze plan, so they weren't going to, because Vita was also kind of doing her own thing while also still aiming towards it was all going towards the same goal. She was just hoping to approach it a different way than the rest of, like, the Anguis and the Grandmaster had agreed on. So, but it's just, so it's like, right, of course you wouldn't leave Heimdall. But it's like, to be fair, they never heard too much about what Ouroboros was up to in that year period. I mean, as we can tell, they're involved in the, everything in the Northern War. Yes. I mean, everything with like, Northumbria, sure. But after that, I think they went quiet for like the next, 6 months or so. They went quiet. So, and really quickly circling that, because we did see Ash. I think I brought this up last episode. I don't remember if I was like, oh, I wonder will we get to see Muse, but it doesn't seem like we will. But my justification was like, well, she might be at Saint Estrella right now, so maybe that's why also justification. Because we don't know what her circumstances were like, how often she actually visited Ordis, but just because of everything with Duke Cayenne and everything. Like, who knows how often yes, her grandparents are there, but maybe she mainly wrote to them and hasn't really been back in a while. Like, maybe 3 is the first time she was back in a long time, or it never really came up how often she went back home, considering her circumstances. So, but that was just kind of nice. And then, lo and behold, they go the rower and end up running into, you see Sharon and Elisa. I'm like, What's also neat, too, is, like, Elisa's wearing, not her Cold Steel 2 outfit, like, what she wore throughout the game, but obviously what she wears at the end of the game. Like, as her and the rest of Class 7 go to the, take the train to, and then at the end, like, when she's at Rower working at, the Rhineford Company, and that outfit she's wearing is what she's wearing now. Her and Sharon's got that, like, oh, of course, me lady, like, look on her face, and just Elisa annoyed. It's like, feels so good. But what was also interesting, aside from some of their pit stops and enjoying some of the things like an elevator or an escalator, like specifically in Rower, makes sense too, because, this is also coming from people from Northumbria, which has, like, for them, it's like, they're going to all these different places. It's like, oh, people seem happy. It's like, yeah, from a, country that's economically doing well and just everything's, they don't have to fight and struggle to the extent that Northumbrians do. So it is kind of a night and day thing. I'm like, man, like, wow, the Erebonian circumstances are wild. But also, it's like, okay, so look into this hero. It's like, yeah, we don't know much about him. I think they even said, like, just the Ashen Chevalier is all he's really known as. I'm like, they've said Ring's name in the papers and stuff like that, haven't they? But even if they had, it's like, you wouldn't know his name outright. It wouldn't be a thing of like, oh yeah, it's like, it's a clear cut, like, oh yeah, like, we know exactly, who he is and his background, because you would think the Class 7 stuff would come up, but to be fair, Ring probably doesn't, it kind of, you can't forget too, like, he is kind of like, it's not like Reen had any infamy. Like, if you knew Reen and you knew Class 7 ahead of time, you'd be like, oh my god, Reen Schwarzer, that's that kid from Class 7 from Thor's military academy. Other than that, to most of Erebonia, like, unless you had an interaction with Reen, to everyone else, it's like, oh, who's this guy? Like, he came out of nowhere. But the people who know who he is. All his, like, friends, all his, like, so I guess that also led to his celebrity not being so wild. We did see a kid in Rower with a Valimar toy. Once again, the merchandising. I talked about it a little bit because of like the puppet show that had like a Valimar and everything. It's like, that's wild. But it's like the whole conversation, like, right, no one really knows much about him. I had brought that up previously, well, a couple of times too. It's like, right, Marine also said in 3's prologue when he's talking to Patrick, he avoided a whole bunch of interviews over the past this is still the early parts of that year time skip, and he still avoided so many, like, probably, like, public appearances and stuff like that. So they end up going to Ymir. It's been, like, supposedly the hometown of the hero, and it's like, well, also, Ring doesn't go home that often, too, so, and obviously they didn't, I think they probably, to avoid suspicion, they probably, like, didn't really, they probably got some stuff here off screen information-wise, but I don't know how much, because everyone in that town legitimately does love Rain. Obviously, like, he means a lot to them. They're just, like, the Schwarzers in general mean a lot to that town, but I don't know how much they're going to speak on Rain and his circumstances, because it's like, yeah, they probably want to give Rain his space, too, so, it doesn't really come up that much, but, I do love that, like, Isaria wants to, like, go to the hot springs. And it's also weird seeing Ymir without the snow, because the entire time we've seen Ymir, it's only been in 2 where the snow, because I think you go back to Ymir. Once again, this is me speaking out of pocket, but, like, I think you go back to Ymir in Trails of Reverie. Hajimari no Kiseki. Like, I want to say you do, but I could be wrong, and that might be back in winter time as well. So, to be fair, Class 7 did go. God, when did they go? Octoberish, like in between Chapter 6 and 7, they went of the first game. So, but it's so weird just to see it not covered in snow. And we see some townspeople running up to go towards the Barrens, because I guess they're trying to figure out, what do we do about, because the hot springs are frozen, much to Isaria's dismay, and she wanted to try, like, oh god, because she's in the shop, because you're like, oh my god, I know and made sure, because obviously they have, like, those characters, the husband and wife that run, what was it, Plovers, what's that place's name? The manju, the wife who makes the manju. Obviously you had a whole quest related to it, so it's kind of neat seeing it kind of play out like that. And this area wants to try it out, but obviously, like, all the hot springs related stuff is, like, frozen, because it also, like, feeds into not only the Phoenix wing, but also here too. It's like, oh, sadly we didn't get to see, like, oh god, God, was it Maple and Purple? The maids that work there. We did hear, like, was it Braggins, the head person at the Phoenix Wing? We heard his name get dropped, but that's about it. But, still, dude. Isaria is kind of motivated to help out, because I love Marty spinning. It's like, oh, well, we'd be able to get this, and this if we helped out, right? And Isaria is, like, really perked up. It's like, don't worry, me and Lavi, we got this. So they're the ones that, I don't know if that's located in the Isengard range or not, or whether that's just kind of, like, past the Ymir Valley. If you go far enough in the Ymir Valleys, you eventually will get to the Isengard mountain range. I don't know if that's, like, that location they went to it seemed like it could be. That circumstance led them crossing paths with a monster that kind of fused it disguises itself as Septian, or fuses with Septium to kind of draw you in. And Isaria got trapped. For one, Lavi was not happy because, like, cool, I got caught up in those rocks and I was dangling my legs in the air and you were laughing. There's that. But also you lied to me and said they were explosives so that I would get out of the way so I wouldn't get caught up on this. And Isaria's, like, having this whole, like, almost like existential crisis moment, but also being so, like, cavalier about it. And I think it's just the nature of, right, if I could have lived my life, I would have just been a normal girl. Which the way she's talking and the way she acts, especially around Lavi, I'm like, wait, are you kind of the Angelica of the Northern Jaegers? I mean, I don't think you're as wild as Angelica. I think you're like a much more toned down Angelica, but I definitely got, I was like, oh, you very Angelica-esque in some regards. Either way. But it's like, no, shut up. We'll get this done. And once again, she can be very like, oh my god, I can't believe you fired a gun. But it's also like, yeah, but once again, back to that cavalier attitude of, well, you won't know until you try, right? So she ends up, Lavi has to get higher up, use a very special round, the Pierce at it. You know, the whole trajectory conversation I thought was so interesting because it's like, I don't know, like, it's something, that whole, like, the math and elements of, like, trajectory and stuff like that, it's something that comes up at, like, the branch campus and, like, the main campus of Thor's military academy, like, during, like, exam stuff, like, trajectory. I want to say that's specifically, like, a 3 topic. I don't remember if that came up on the exams in 1 or not, but it kind of reminds me of that. Plus, like, also, like, when they're doing the calculations, in Nord, and Emma's like, oh, I can tell you where those, if I have the map and area right, and, you know, the information, I can, like, figure out the trajectory of these, like, mortars and stuff like that. Ended up being the case in, chapter 3 with the whole Nord situation. But regardless, it kind of, I don't know, it's just one of those interesting things, like the trajectory and like having to come at it from an angle. You don't really hear that come up too much, but some of those few instances I referenced. Luckily, both shooting on both sides ended up focusing and ended up killing the thing, but then it turned into a palm, a very special, because at first I was like, wait, is this going to be like, but it's like, no, it's blue. I was like, that's interesting. I mean, maybe because it fused with the septium, maybe it was like a shining palm that fused with, because I think it has wings. I think the shining palms are the only one that had the little wings. So it looked, not unless it's like a special breed of shining palm, so got the whole situation dealt with, but it did lead to, I think that has been a nice aspect of this. You know, obviously last episode, her and Tally, and now her and Saria. So even Marty's noting how, like, oh, it's kind of nice that they are kind of in a better place. They've actually gotten closer. Even him and Tally had their moments where they were both digging for springs, which even he was like, yeah, it's kind of interesting. You want to go above and beyond for these Erebonians. Kind of makes you wonder, like, right, what country do we belong to? And he's like, well, it's like, no, I get it. The fact of the matter is, God, what was it that Marty said specifically? He's just kind of like, right, whatever the case may be, it's like, I can't chastise you because I'm like right here, right beside you, like helping out in this regard. So they went digging for another hot spring and they ended up finding one, like, well, at least some hot spring water. And I think you see them later on, like when all of them are in the hot spring, you see the little palm creature, and also it looks like one of the sheeps, which I'm like, one of the kind of creepy sheep creatures from in Erebony, which I think is so interesting too, because it's like, well, we know, I mean, there's a whole side quest, which from Code Steel 2, that's very similar to it's kind of an homage to another quest in the Sky games that's all about dealing with monsters that are attracted to the hot springs. I mean, I guess you made the argument there's also the connection of, like, there's also that quest in the Crossbell games about the swimsuit beach thing, so it's very similar in that regard, so I guess, you know, it's all kind of connected. But specifically on the hot spring front, it's more the direct correlation between the Sky games and the Cold Steel games. But Lavi wants to learn more from this area, but like, right, learning to all that, because Lavi's kind of lived her life just focusing on one thing, and I think obviously this journey is going to be good for her because it's going to make her a lot more well-rounded about all the stuff that Asaria is kind of interested in, and she's like super all about that. So I don't know, just kind of a nice shenanigans-filled adventure. Like I said, I get the feeling like a lot of this is going to be that, while also sprinkling in some main plot stuff. There was this, I'm curious, I want to say it's Blue Block was reading this when they were in Heimdall. It's a newspaper that says, like, oh, Delegator or something meets with Osborn. I'm like, I wonder who's that supposed to be. I wonder, is that like a character we would know at first? Because I'm like, because if it was anyone, it'd be like oh god, I don't remember. I don't think it is because I was wondering if it was the guy from Crossbell. Because each in Crossbell there were representatives that kind of acted as intermediaries at the consulates for like Erebonia and Calvert, and you got to know them a little bit over the course of the Crossbell games. Them, I don't think it. I'm pretty sure it wasn't the guy from the Erebonia side of things. Because also it'd be like, right, it's delegates from a different country. I was like, the character model. I was like, I don't recognize it. I was like, I don't see it as like Albert or anything. I was like, it's like I don't think it would be anyone from Crossbell. So I'm wondering like who could that be? I mean, if it's anyone important, the fact that they showed it made me think it could be, but it could be me reading way too much into it. So, either way, we also got our little thing at the end where it's Sarah, not the person. I'm blanking on her name now. Was it like Jania or something like it's something with a J if I remember correctly. She gets orders from was it Commander Glark? We're sending him to Legram now, which I thought that was the case. I brought it up previously, the picture at the end with in front of a training dummy. I was like, that looks like that's in like the the training hall in Legram. It totally is. So I thought that was interesting. So it's like, all right, you're going to Legram next, which I'm like, I wonder why. What specifically are you trying to... Because, I mean, everywhere else, it's obviously, like, trying to get more info. Like, it makes sense the places you're hitting up to some extent. I mean, Heimdall and Rower make the most sense. You'd hope to gather some information. I mean, they're also... to be fair, it's like, at least Heimdall and obviously Rower are places that had connections to Reen too, and so does Legram, but I'm like, and Ymir obviously, but I'm like, I wonder what their real reason for going to like Legram would be. And obviously we see Campanella helping out, and it also seems like, what's his face, big time Northern Jaeger dude is in the know about all of this, and she's like, entice me more. You're just like, man, this is super not going to go your way. Once again, that's why I'm like so curious. Are we setting her up to be like, no, she eventually come like, this isn't going to go your way. It's not going to go North Ambria's way at all. But then I'm like, well, could it be a thing of it might not go their way now? I mean, and once again, will she pull a Maribel and just like end up becoming part of Ouroboros or something? Maybe not. We'll have to wait till the end of all this to find out. I should also point out something I was thinking too. Obviously, they had to rely on Lavi and them to help out, but even then, I was like, well, they are in Erebonia, and Bracers are. It's still the Bracer guilds are still shut down, especially at this point in time. So I was about to say, like, I mean, obviously, Ymir has its ties to Toval, but I mean, like Toval's. I mean, they probably don't have the easiest way to get in contact with him to help out, considering the circumstances, because like that feels like that'd be something you'd ask a Bracer to do. But like as we know, Ymir doesn't have a Bracer guild, and the closest one, if there was still one, you would assume the closest one would be like Rower, if there was even still a Bracer guild around. So like they don't have anyone they can really contact with in that type of situation. So it does make you wonder how did I mean obviously Teo probably handles a lot of that stuff, being like the hunter there, but also like he is a proficient swords person as well. So it does make you wonder how Ymir handles a lot of those issues that a Bracer would handle in their regard. Maybe it doesn't come up that often, stuff that they can't handle themselves. I don't know. I'm probably like reading way too much into it, but like I said, I thought that was kind of interesting too. So, like I said, next stop is Legram. It's interesting too because like every place they've been into those pictures at the end of the episodes, Legram's the last one. I guess they did kind of go to every area like in order from those pictures based on what we've seen. So Legram is like the last picture, so this is gonna be. So I don't know whether that's just implying like, after this it's just gonna be plot, or is it just gonna be a thing of when it's all said and done, like they just don't want to spoil any other surprises of where they're gonna go. And also seeing the Erebonian map a little bit at the beginning, you're like, oh god, that's so, it feels so weird. Also because Regardless, I'm interested to see, for one, what ends up happening in Legrom, which is also interesting too, because that obviously has its tie to Ouroboros. They unknowingly has their ties to Ouroboros as well, so I don't know. We'll see how that all ends up playing out. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good